Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will bring you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts your community. Plus, Edgar has had a busy day today over at the state capitol. We'll tell you why he was at the state capitol and why he was testifying in front of the Senate.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with ACSA's executive director, Dr. Edgar Zazweta. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are so happy to have you with us today. Go ahead and jump onto the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from. Neri Paiz, our great friend from Los Angeles, first on the chat today. Edgar, in fact, he gave us, I think, 4 comments right off the top. So great to have him, and it's been a busy week for all of us here at ACSA.
Yeah, it has been a good busy week, but it's good to get to do this, Naj. And yeah, I mean, maybe Neri thought that today was one of your giveaway days where you give something for most comment. But we're all I love seeing him and the entire team here earlier this week. It was just an exciting week. It was great to have our members in town, right? As we said, we had done the virtual offering here for a few years to be able to have people come in and take over the Capitol and be in our ACSA offices. It was nice. Our members do such a good job of hosting us throughout the year, right? We get to go oftentimes to their regions, sometimes to their schools. It was nice to have folks here in the ACSA offices. I saw Grant in the chat. I'm just gonna give him a shout out here. I changed my background today, I think partly just to show off. You might be able to see over my shoulder. I got some cool Paris High School swag, which I was excited to get a box of goodies from. Sorry, nothing for you, Naj.
Seriously. Come on, Grant.
Hey, everybody sends you helmets and all kinds of, it once in a while. I got to get hooked up. So
is it the hat? Is it the hat right over your left shoulder?
Next to the ACSA.
There we go.
Yes,
okay.
Next to the ACSA
right,
helmet there. So I was excited to get some swag there from my alma mater.
There you go. And Edgar was talking about our ACSA legislative action days. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a couple of minutes, because we had an incredible group of speakers that came through. Our state superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurman, was there. We honored 2 members with our Friend of Public Education Award, had some great panels. So we'll tackle all of that, review our legislative action days coming up in just a couple of moments. Want to go ahead and say hello. Estela Jimenez with us, Charlie Hoffman, William Redford with us. I saw Mark Campbell on there, Mina Blasi. Again, so good to have all of you guys here. Okay, I mentioned this in the open. Been a busy day for ACSA, been a busy day for Edgar. Here's why. Senator Josh Newman presented today Senate Bill 494. It's legislation that will require school boards to provide more than 24 hours notice if they intend to dismiss a California public school district leader. This is a bill that is sponsored by ACSA. The legislation would modify Ed Code related to school board actions when they dismiss a superintendent or assistant superintendent without cause. Now, here are the tenets of SB 494. It would require 72 hours notice before a public hearing to terminate a superintendent or assistant superintendent without cause, and school boards may not take action to terminate without cause within 30 days following the first convening of a school board meeting. The Senate bill also would improve transparency and community awareness when changes in non-elected school leadership are under consideration. It will also help school board members gain a more complete understanding of what happens in the school district. Now, a key driver, and we've talked about this before, of this proposed legislation, the dismissal of a Southern California superintendent through a surprise board meeting that was scheduled just 24 hours before any public notice went out. This was during the district's holiday break. The superintendent was out of the country, had to rush back. She was fired. An interim superintendent was appointed. 5 weeks later, that interim superintendent quit. A trustee from Orange Unified School District, that's the district we were talking about, spoke on behalf of the proposed legislation, discussed some of the challenges. She talked about the decision has resulted in distrust among the school board members in the community. The district is losing quality administrators. And then she went on to include some comments from student government leaders. They commented, they pointed to a state of chaos in the district, that the focus has been taken away from the students and they're stuck in the middle of an intense political climate. Edgar testified on behalf of Senate Bill 494. Here's what he had to say.
This is something we're very sensitive to. And in our organization, we've always been the biggest proponent of local control, like the school boards. And what we think, by not having this in place, it actually prevents that local control. Because what we've seen in some of these cases is the community hasn't got a chance to weigh in. So because it's happened immediately, just giving the community, they were rushed, hey, we didn't even know this happened. So giving them a chance to have a voice in the process.
And we spoke with Josh Newman Monday. He was at our 2023 ACSA Legislative Action Days. He had a fireside chat with Iván Carrillo, ACSA Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations, who will join us in just a couple of moments. Newman spoke specifically about SB 494 and why it's important for student outcomes.
You have a situation where people, ran for the Board of Education in their district because they want to, maybe they're a parent, maybe not, but they want to make sure that kids have the best education. They now have to stare out from the dais at all these angry people, and I'm all for people being involved, but we have to make sure that we don't get so far off track that we lose sight of the objective of education and governance for education, which is to make students succeed.
And as you would imagine, there was some opposition from parent groups, but there is bipartisan support from the committee. Edgar, we played a clip of yours there, showed some video, talked with the senator. Give us your reflections on your testimony today and just this proposed legislation in general.
Well, first of all, on a lighter note, it was good to get back to my roots and to the advocacy, right? This is how, even before I started with ACSA, I used to be in the Capitol doing the testimony. So I was joking with the staff. It had been a long time since Edgar got to do that, and some things were different, right? Hence, different age. I was surprised by the plexiglass, which, still some of the remnants there of the COVID mitigation. It's just interesting just how they're having to engage the public. There's in-phone testimony. So a lot of things going on there in the committee room. 2-minute speeches are not always Edgar Strong's suit, right? Like we had to be quick and succinct and try to make our points. But it was good. I mean, we had a positive result in terms of the bill moving forward. And I think they were really receptive to the ACSA message. In terms of, like I say there in the clip, this bill has never been about trying to limit local control or taking away authority from school boards. It really is what we've seen, unfortunately, and we've talked about it on this show, especially coming off of the last election, that we had a number of communities here around the state where our leaders were dismissed, not because they weren't serving kids, not because there was a track record of low academic results. It was, I hate to put it this way, it was because of politics.
Yeah.
It was because the board changed and there was a playbook and they came in and they basically said, no, it doesn't matter who's in place. What we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to fire the superintendent. And, in the case of Orange, they also fired the deputy superintendent. These folks, these are our members who we've had to go out and then try to support. And then we heard a number of other cases. There's been some egregious examples around the state, even when they haven't been successful, about folks being notified on President's Day that they're the weekend of President's Day, that there's going to be action taken the next day. Right. And so all of this to say is that's why we think that SB 494, and one of the comments that we made this morning is that it's just sensible, good policy that at minimum, this is like low hanging fruit, that if we're going to go through the effort of having all these requirements, these transparency requirements, making sure there's proper notice when we're going to hire somebody, right? That when a community, when a district, when a school board is going to hire a leader, and that's a high stakes position. That, one that the research actually shows there's a direct correlation that stability, district leadership does have a correlation in terms of student outcomes, not to mention, the staff culture, about being able to recruit educators to work in that district. So on and on, these are important decisions. If you're going to have that high standard when you're going to hire somebody, that we should have those same type of requirements when somebody is going to be dismissed, right? And so, yeah, this bill talks about senior leadership. So obviously, it's superintendents or deputies or anybody that has a contract with the district. But I think from the ACSA standpoint, it also impacts all of our members, right? The one thing that we've seen is when there is an instability, when there's instability amongst our highest leaders, that has a trickle down effect to our site administrators, to the teachers, to everybody in between. So we think, this is not gonna mitigate all the issues that we've seen, but at least it puts another barrier there to at least give the public a chance, like we've seen in Orange, like we've seen in some of these cases, that folks went in there and said, hey, and had their voices heard. So we're really proud at ACSA to be the sponsors of this legislation, and it was great to see that in action. Shout out to Dorothy Johnson on our team and the entire GR team who's been really spearheading this. They brought me in today to be able to say some words on behalf of the organization. But this has really been a strong coalition, and we got some partners. I'm proud to say we got CTA to actually support the bill. That wasn't a given. We had a number of other entities. We got bipartisan support as well. We got a few members of the Senate there, both Democrats and Republicans, to move the bill around. So first step, long way to go, but a positive first step today.
Hey, let me ask you, because one of the senators, I don't remember which senator it was in particular, talked about how this proposed legislation is very narrow in focus, that it's not overly broad. And as you mentioned, doesn't remove local control. It really just, allows for some of the process to really take effect. And here's something that really stuck out to me about the school boards not being able to take action to terminate without cause within 30 days following the first convening of a school board. I can guarantee that there isn't one person who is on the that's watching this show right now that wouldn't agree that the learning curve when you're a new school board member, it's a learning curve. You don't just walk in and you know everything. At least a 30-day window there gives a new school board member the opportunity to learn about the district, the inner workings, the budget, all of that. I have to assume, Edgar, because you've been at a school district before, because you talk with our leaders all the time, that was a really important window to allow for an onboarding, if you will, before decisions are made.
Yeah, and I think it's important to clarify everything you said, 100% true. And with that said, we also understand there's cases, and I think our members, our superintendents would be the first to acknowledge, there's cases where a board has to take action because it's an egregious case, right? If you name it, I don't have to go into detail. We could all think of the egregious cases where somebody has to take action immediately. Nothing in this bill would actually impact that. Like this is when it's with cause, a board can take action immediately. What you said is essentially the intent here, that when we have a new board, if you're a new board member, that yes, that there is some time, this cooling off period, if you will, to really reflect on, hey, what's going on with this district? What are the inner workings? What's the leadership like? Like all of us, when we step into a new position, I think the first thing you always want to do is first learn before taking decisive action. And I think that's what we've seen, unfortunately, that in some cases, these leaders never had a chance. The new board didn't want to evaluate their performance, didn't want to evaluate what was going on. Unfortunately, sometimes because the board shifted in a particular way, they wanted changes again because of the politics, or in some cases, some of the bigger culture wars that are kind of impacting our communities. They're playing itself out in our schools, but they're not really anything that's just foundationally because of the schools. So I think, again, this piece of just making sure that there's some time for that reflection, making sure that there's some minimum, I mean, we're talking about very minimum noticing requirements, is at least an initial first step there.
Yeah, and the one thing, and then we'll move off this topic. The one thing that really stuck out to me was the clarity from the student government leaders that was brought to the table by the trustee from Orange Unified School District, pointing to a state of chaos in the district, that the focus had been taken away from the students. that they were stuck in the middle of a political climate. I mean, that's some strong clarity and transparency from the students, and I'm glad that it was included in this discussion. So, Edgar, just to wrap this, so now that we've had this initial testimony inside Senate Education Committee, what comes next?
Yeah, I believe the bill is going to move, and actually I should know this, but I don't. I believe it may go to one of their fiscal committees. There may be some other committees that are also going to review this. Ultimately, it needs to go to the full Senate, then we'll go through the process in the Assembly. So it'll evolve, and like we talk a lot in the show, that there may be some evolution to the language and the provisions, and that's the beauty of the legislative process, right? That they get a lot of input, and the conversation will evolve as we go.
Yeah. Folks, let's go ahead and transition over to some legislative updates. We've obviously told you about Senate Bill 494 for the first 15 minutes of our show. Let's go ahead and switch gears and talk about some of the other stuff that's happening. Iván Carrillo is ACSA's Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. He joins us right now. Iván, so good to have you here on the show. I know it's been a busy week with Ledge Action Day, so welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Every time I see that headshot, I feel like it needs to be updated. Not looking that young anymore.
Is Iván coming in here and giving requests right off the bat? He waited to go public to say he wants us to get him a new headshot. I don't know. You're still looking young, Iván. So I don't know. I think that one's gonna serve you maybe for a bit of time. I know we had some. We finally came and let Naj get some new headshots, but his looked a little dated on his end.
Wait a minute. Did you just say my new one looks dated on my end? Or my
no. I'm sorry. Your old one. We got you a new one because you would come in. I think Iván's using your tactic. You would come in on the lunch break and talk about how your headshot was dated there. So I think Iván is trying to angle from the same strategy.
Look, Edgar, it was 11 years old. What did you want me to do? Iván's is probably like 2 years old or something like that. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
Hey, Iván, first of all, congratulations. It made me immense amount of pride just to not only see you, the entire government relations staff, really take the bulk of it, right? We get thanks, and I know even yourself and Naj and the whole team, we know there's a ton of people behind the scenes that make that event a reality. And all told, I mean, we saw the energy, we saw the excitement of people coming in here. So I'm just curious, right? We've been talking as the week's gone on. What were your reflections? What was your takeaways? This was a big step. We hadn't had in-person Ledge Action Day since 2019. Obviously, we found other ways to do the work. So this was a big step to get people back to Sacramento. How do you think it went?
No, for sure. There's a great amount of pride in just the work that we all collectively did, and we being ACSA staff, and I mean that broadly speaking. There was all hands on deck when it comes to staff being involved and contributing to the event, but our members as well. And our VPLAs deserve a special shout out for leading us through the year's worth of work to get us to this point. But by all accounts, this was a great success and continues to be. It should be noted that while the in-person portion of our legislative action days has concluded, there are meetings that are continuing to happen with legislators and their offices throughout this week. But it was incredible. There was just so much energy that I know that both of you all felt from our members, that were just fired up to be back in Sacramento and to be advocating for issues and changes that we know are going to make really meaningful differences in young people's lives. So we had nearly 250 members who made the trek. There were nearly 100 different meetings with legislators and legislative offices that took place over the 2 days. We had really prominent members, elected officials who came and spoke to us, as noted by Naj at the front end. The chairs of both legislative education committees, our state superintendent of public instruction, but all the really movers and shakers, the highest level staff people that are formulating our state budget, that are providing the analysis for bills that either move or don't move. Please know that all the key content was captured and videotaped by our Marcom department and is available on our YouTube channel. So if you weren't able to be here, I encourage you to head to our YouTube channel and look up those videos, because there's some really substantive dialogue that took place. But yeah, no, it was great. Still riding on a high from it, Edgar.
Yeah. And just to make note of that, before we go through some of these bills, as Iván had mentioned, we have videos up on our YouTube page. All of the events from Legislative Action Day. We've got the interview with Josh Newman. We've got our presentations with Brooks Allen and with Al Maritsucci. We've got the Tony Thurmond keynote address and a number of panel discussions. So if you weren't there, go ahead and take a look at those. If you were and you want to see it again, those are available for you. And if you're in the chat, we would love to know your reflections on Legislative Action Day. And of course, if you had a meeting with any of your lawmakers, we'd love to know how that went. Okay, Iván, let's go rapid fire here on some legislation. As we mentioned for most of the show, Edgar testifying over at the Capitol on Senate Bill 494. Let's go through some of these. First, let's talk arts, music, instructional materials block grant. What do we know right now?
Yeah, so we know that we're making gains, that we know that our advocacy efforts are having effect. And so this was one of the issues that was front and center here during Legislative Action Days, and talking about what the retroactive cut to these one-time dollars that were built into last year's budget would mean to schools and to students. So legislators are receiving this message positively by all accounts. All the meetings that we've had, Megan Baer and our team has been front and center leading that work, and we're hearing them ask good questions during budget subcommittee hearings, using some of the talking points that we provided. You all have been very key in terms of responding to a survey that we put out, and so we've been providing that data to legislators when we've been meeting with their offices, and so folks have pointed to that and talked about it from a really local context. But a lot of this is going to be dictated by how we see revenues continue to shake out, and so state revenues continue to fall significantly short. That trend continues to just happen and not be turned around. So we're all bracing ourselves to see what's going to be built into the governor's May revise. But certainly from a legislative perspective, there's some really good momentum. We have a really big coalition of not only education management groups that have joined in these efforts, but also our labor partners as well are supporting the effort to protect these funds.
Hey, Iván, as we've gone around the state, the consistent question, even post-pandemic, I think one of the issues still plaguing the system is just workforce issues, right? Not finding enough teachers or even administrators or across the whole, classified employees. I know that there was this tendency with the state lawmakers thinking that, oh, this is really because it's a COVID issue. And once we get past the hardest part of the pandemic, that things would quote unquote back to normal. One of the things we've been trying to remind them is that even the normal, we were still having challenges there, right? I know we get questions a lot about where are we at on that issue? Is there going to be any relief? I know that was one of the issues we were advocating for this week. I know there's a bill out there that we're really pushing. What updates do you have on that end?
Yeah, something that just took place today, actually, in the Senate Education Committee. So SB 765, authored by Senator Portantino, is one of these really important measures that will provide just another tool in the tool chest for our folks to be able to staff open positions. And that's to loosen up restrictions within CalSTRS that really prohibit folks from retirees from being able to come back into the classroom, to become back into school leadership positions. Earnings cap, specifically speaking about, as well as this 180-day sit-out period. And so these would remove those restrictions for a couple of years. It just passed out of its first policy committee with bipartisan support, and so gaining momentum and just feel really good about the direction that that's headed.
And folks, if you have any questions for Iván for legislative updates, go ahead and put those into the chat, and we'll address those at the end of the show. Iván, let me ask you about AB 247, the schools facilities bond. What can you tell us?
It's moving. it gained bipartisan support, and so that's something that is notable. That it's both Democrats and Republicans that are supporting this. Additionally, I think it want to point out that there's been real special attention to small school districts, and that's certainly a drum that we've been beating, and wanting to make sure that small school districts are not put in a position where they're having to in terms of applications that they're putting forth, that they're competing with large school districts that have more resources and staff capacity to be able to submit applications and to be able to follow this in a way that smalls aren't positioned to do so. And so notably within the bill, as language that was recently added was to carve out 10% of the school bond amount specifically for small school districts, again, to ensure that smalls have a significant portion of the state facilities dollars that are set aside for them. But it got out of committee, bipartisan support, and is moving.
Hey, Iván, another question. I know it's been a very timely subject, and Sheldon Smith asked us a question that we've been getting a lot is around Prop 28. I know we've done some work there in collaboration with school services on trying to get some messaging out. What's the latest on that? I know Sheldon asked specifically about interpretation, supplements, and plan. I know there's some other issues. What's the latest update on that topic?
Well, there's a recognition that clarity needs to be provided. And so we do know from speaking with lawmakers and Department of Finance staff that there's going to be trailer bill language to be able to provide clarity on this. And so the issue that Sheldon is referencing is one of those pieces that we're specifically advocating for is some clarity around the supplement, what the supplemental language does, in fact, what that's attributed to. What dollars, and making sure that one-time funds aren't included, making sure that funds that are raised by parent groups to support the arts within a school district is not included as well. So there will be trailer bill language. Advocacy efforts still continue, but we've heard that these dollars, it's going to be quite some time before they are distributed out to the field. Department of Ed has pointed to the legislature to say that clarity is needed for them to be able to move forward with dispersing the funds and providing guidance. But it will be some time, and we'll keep information front and center for our membership on that.
Iván, let me ask you one final one. Senate Bill 292, CASP test results data publication. What can you tell us?
Yeah, this is a bill that we support. This is an issue that came to head in the fall of this last year, where the Department of Education was really dragging its feet in terms of the release of CASP test results, and that put our folks in a really tough position in terms of responding to their school communities. And so what this bill would do is put a deadline in place that the Department of Education would have to meet in terms of the release of CASP data, and that would be October 15th. And so that got out of committee with strong bipartisan support earlier today as well.
Iván, one last one for me. I know you alluded to this. I mean, for all the good things, I mean, we had some progress on some of these bills we're following. One topic that's causing people a little bit more apprehension is kind of the budget picture, because the numbers haven't looked great there. I know we're a few weeks from May revise. I was getting questions earlier today from superintendents, from others, about where are we at on the COLA? Do we think that's going to be funded? Do we know where the state's going to head? I mean, what are we reading? Reading the tea leaves, if you will, here. Where do we see things going? Obviously, it feels like there's more at stake in this May revise coming up here in a few weeks than maybe there has been over the last number of years. What are we hearing?
So we know there's going to be really difficult decisions that are going to have to be made. I think for earlier in the year, we were hopeful that there would be a turnaround in terms of the revenue picture, but there hasn't been. And so on the general fund side, the latest numbers that we've seen is the projection to be $4.5 billion short of what was built into last year's budget and what was estimated. And so that's again, a real issue that lawmakers are going to have to respond to. And there's only so many options that they have, given that they've been on record saying that they want to stay the course. And that's a message that the governor reflected in his January budget as well, that programs that were enacted over the last couple of years are ones that they're not going to move away from, including expanded learning opportunities program, universal transitional kindergarten, universal meals, to name a few. And so again, taking all those options off the table, there's not many more that they're left with. So May revise is going to be a real key date that we're all looking at in terms of what the updated numbers that the governor is projecting. We do know that the COLA is anticipated to go up from what it was in January, the statutory COLA amount, and so it was 8.13% back in January. And so we've heard loud and clear to expect a higher COLA than that amount, so maybe closer to 8.5%. That doesn't mean that it's going to be funded at that amount. So that's one of these options that the lawmakers and the governor have in terms of trying to save money, is potentially funding it at a lower amount. But yeah, I guess in short, the revenue picture hasn't turned the corner. I think that we were hopeful of. But one last piece on it, Edgar, is just filing tax deadlines being punted out until the late fall is kind of having them fly in the blind as well. And so there's probably going to be a fairly fiscally conservative approach that's taken in terms of the budget, because they don't have the clear revenue picture that they normally do because of tax deadlines being pushed back for most counties until the late fall.
Iván Carrillo, ACSA's Senior Director of Policy and Governmental Relations. Iván, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Folks, want to give you a couple of reminders. We told you everything that was on our YouTube page from our Legislative Action Days. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. You will get alerts when we're about to come on the air with breaking news and, of course, our regularly scheduled ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. So go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. Also, if you have great stories happening in your school community, we want to tell those stories in EdCal. Go ahead and send that information on what's happening in your district to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@acsa.org. And this allows me, Edgar, one last thing to talk about May 12th, National School Communicators Day. And I can talk about it because I am a school communicator. Again, that's May 12th. We have resources on the ACSA Resource Hub from our good friends over at CalSPRA about how you in your district can honor your school communicator. We've got a number of them that watch our show very often. Marie Russell from Turlock Unified, Marcy McFadden, Michelle Eklund over at Placer County Office of Ed, and Scott Smith over at ABC Unified. So if you are a district leader, go on to the ACSA Resource Hub and download some of that material to honor your school communicator. Edgar, I know we're across the bottom of the hour, but would just ask for you to sum up everything that's happened at the Capitol today with this ACSA sponsored bill.
I will beat the drum that we always beat, whether not just with 494, with all of the issues we were advocating for this week. It's always exciting when we get our members to come and do the field trip, if you will, and go across the street to the Capitol. But one of the things we always say is that don't let it stop there, right? No matter where you're at in the system, no matter what role you're currently in, find a way to make that connection to the policymakers, to those decision makers, whether it be working with your district leadership to make sure that those folks are coming to your schools to really help paint the picture about what's happening. And Iván put it, we've gone from Legislative Action Day to Legislative Action Days, and really with the emphasis that all this week is focused on advocacy. What we really need, especially given some of these changing fiscal times, is that we're going to have to really step up our efforts on that education, not just on one day, not just 1 week, but really throughout the year. So hopefully it's just a reminder for all of us to continue beating that drum and continue down that path.
And thank you, folks, so much for joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here at 1 p.m. on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.